I have shocking news for you. Sometimes promoters will purposely create mismatched fights in order to boost the career of a fighter that makes them money.
Surely you can't be serious.
We call these gimme fights. They're meant to easily pad the fighter's record and showcase their talents. Like that one guy who was literally just a dude that fought Jack Swagger in Bellator. Well, sometimes these absolute layup fights go horribly wrong, and I can't wait to revel in every single one that we talk about. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and these are 10 gimme fights that backfired spectacularly. Number 10. Colossal failure. James Thompson is truly the best possible guy to pair up with your big up-and-coming heavyweight superstar, and the reason for that is twofold. One, he looks like the scariest person you can imagine in your mind. If you told a person who doesn't watch MMA to draw the scariest fighter possible, they would just draw James Thompson without even knowing who he is. The second reason he's great for your star is that he loses a lot. I mean, Elite XC used the guy twice for this very reason. First, they put him up against Brett Rogers, who would go on to fight Fedor. Then they put him in there with Kimbo Slice for the very same purpose in front of a bajillion people on CBS as a main event. This guy would make Al Snow incredibly proud. By the time Thompson finds his way to Poland to compete in KSW, James had lost 12 of his last 16 fights. 11 of those were finishes. And why was Thompson brought to Poland? Because he was going to do the Kimbo Slice fight for five-time World's Strongest Man champion Mariusz Pudzianowski. Puds was already a legend in Poland, but had in recent years started dabbling in mixed martial arts. While he'd lose to Tim Sylvia in the US, in Poland at KSW shows, Mariusz was unbeaten at 3-0. His most recent victory, a TKO against the biggest version of Butterbean I have ever seen. I'm glad he got his weight down in recent years. And so the stage was set for another star-building victory for the Polish strongman. But nobody told James Thompson that he was cannon fodder. And maybe they did, but he didn't listen to them. After gassing himself out hard in the first round, throwing the kitchen sink at Thompson, Puds had absolutely nothing left for the Colossus, who, while he might have a lot of losses, was absolutely a skilled veteran who knew how not to blow his wad in the first 3 minutes.
James Thompson.
An exhausted Pudzianowski would succumb to an arm triangle early in the second round. It was basically KSW's Lesnar versus Carwin. Number 9. Flip out. Michel Pereira made quite the splash in his UFC debut, KOing promotional vet Danny Roberts in under 2 minutes with a flashy flying knee and a straight that flattened Roberts and earned a performance bonus. Michel's unorthodox flippy shit style had fans hyped for the 25-year-old sophomore effort against Sergey Handoshko, but Sergey couldn't get into Canada due to visa issues, and so 4 days before the fight, the UFC called on local Vancouver talent Tristan Connelly, who would be debuting and fighting up a weight class, which, you know, was probably a necessity on zero prep time. But hey, local BC guy, the crowd will cheer him, and Pereira gets to do more fun flippy shit and put an easy dub under his belt. At least that was what everybody assumed. The first snag, Michel missed weight. He had more than 4 days notice on this fight, but apparently wouldn't be bothered. So it was a catch weight bout 172. And then the greatest thing ever happened. Michel flippy shitted himself into a fight of the night decision loss to Canadian hero Tristan Connelly.
If I try and fight his muscle with my muscle, that's a losing fight. And I knew that he liked to start pretty hard and do all this flashy stuff. Sure enough, 2 minutes in, he got tired and I started working, and for the rest of the fight, it was all me.
It was one of those fights where even if you didn't know anything about mixed martial arts, you'd instinctively cheer for Connelly because this other guy was jumping all over the place like a goober, which would tire Michel out and eventually lead to his downfall. A very satisfying gimme loss. Number 8, Prince of Ass. You know who wanted to see former NFL player Greg Hardy in the UFC?
Not me.
Nobody. Not a single person. But that's what happened after just 3 pro bouts, 2 of which were on the Contender Series.
And he's out! Greg Hardy! Another knockout in the first round!
He was being primed by the UFC for stardom, coached by one of Dana's best friends, Dean Thomas. I guess they didn't think that his unsavory reputation outside of sports would matter, but it did, and everybody pretty much instantly hated him.
Considering his checkered past, considering how controversial he is,
I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of people out there that would actually root for him to lose.
Also, he gave himself the nickname the Prince of War. I just have to point that out every single time I talk about him. So the Prince was to debut as the co-main event for the first ever ESPN show. That is how fucking hyped the UFC was. was about having Greg Hardy in their promotion. His opponent? Why, none other than Alan Crowder. Who is Alan Crowder? Exactly. After earning a contract on the Contender Series 3 years into his pro career, Crowder would get KO'd in his UFC debut against Justin Willis in half a round, making him the perfect cannon fodder low-level talent for the first ever Hardy bout. Greg would enter the cage a minus 500 favorite, if that gives you any idea what was expected. Despite struggling with the grappling early, Hardy made it into the second round, where he would throw a super illegal knee.
That is super illegal.
Yes.
And get DQ'd while the crowd chanted asshole at him.
Not only is he going to lose the fight, but the public opinion is going to be horrible on this.
Not the best start. 3 fights later, Hardy would get a win overturned by using an inhaler mid-fight.
The fuck are you doing? How are you using an inhaler?
And eventually go on a 3-bout skid and get let go. And that's pretty much the whole story of Greg Hardy in the UFC.
Oh, there goes Hardy! This one's over!
Number 7, Big Tuna. Before Christian Edwards had even had a professional bout, he was signed to a 5-fight deal with Bellator. And unlike an Aaron Pico, he didn't have some insanely impressive amateur background to warrant his signing. But Christian was the first ever recipient of a scholarship, that is what they were calling it, by Jackson Winklejohn. The gym essentially paid Edwards to train and live at the gym right out of high school. With comparisons to John Jones very early, Christian, who is 6'5" and a light heavyweight, became one of the main sparring partners for JBJ very quickly, and was a big part of his camp for the Thiago Santos fight. In Bellator, Edwards was rolling with 5 straight victories and a top 10 ranking in the division. His next fight would finally be a main card showcase bout, and the hype was building and very real. His next opponent, a man who spent a decade on the regional scene in Mississippi and was mercilessly mocked on Fight Week for his physique. Ben Big Tuna Parrish finally got a chance to compete in Bellator after a 2-year layoff due to an injury. I'll let his boys explain.
Anderson Silva, bro.
Same thing as Anderson Silva, pretty much. Any of them guys you seen. Dude kind of had his weight on one leg when he went to reposition. Just unlucky.
Edwards, the blue chip prospect, Bellator's future JBJ, was a minus 1,000 favorite going into this fight. And why wouldn't he be? He's competing against someone who had a career-ending injury 10 years into his regional scene run and was for the first time competing in a major promotion. This was the definition of a gimme fight. But if there's anything I've learned in the 15 minutes I've known about Ben Parrish, it's that you can never count out Big Tuna.
Parrish just landed! It's on the left hand! Mamma mia! Ben Parrish has shocked the world!
Don't ever doubt me again! Don't you ever bully somebody!
Sadly, that would be the last major victory of Ben's career, but you know what? For that one night, he was King Tuna, and you can't take it away from him.
Look at me, man. People making fun of me all this time, and I've been fighting for 10 years. I've been waiting 10 years for today.
Number 6, Agapova vanquished. When a fight is such a gimme, it ends up being the biggest betting upset in UFC history when you lose. Oops. So here's the setup. After losing to Tracy Cortez on the Contender Series, Maria Agapova would work her way into the UFC via 2 first-round victories in Invicta and would score a performance bonus winning submission in her debut in just half a round. So at 9-1, with her only loss to another hot prospect, Maria was rolling, and the promotion laid an absolute gift in her lap for her second UFC fight, Shana Dobson. This was as close to a sure thing as you could get. She had lost on tough, but managed to win her fight on the finale. After that, 3 straight losses in the promotion, her most recent a 40-second KO loss to Priscilla Cachoeira.
Her? Really?
Honestly, if the division wasn't so shallow, she'd probably have already been given her walking papers. 2 fighters on entirely different trajectories. As a result, Vegas made Agapova a minus 1,400 favorite. That is bonkers, even given the circumstances, and holy shit did this one go south. Myra went all gas, no brakes from the opening horn and found herself too gassed at the start of the second, and a minute in she would get battered on the ground.
Shana Dobson catches as a plus 800 dog tonight!
I'm seeing a pattern here. Stop going so hard at the start of your gimme fights.
I'm so tired. Everything hurts.
Number 5. Smashed Machine. Pride FC wasn't exactly subtle about their matchmaking, particularly in the 2000 Openweight GP. They strategically placed monster American UFC tournament winners Mark Coleman and Mark Kerr, played by Dwayne Johnson, in the same bracket, conveniently very far away from Kazushi Sakuraba, because they really wanted their homegrown star to have a showdown with Royce Gracie. So much so, in fact, that when Kazushi didn't get a decision victory over Guy Mesker in the opening round of the tourney, they just changed the stipulations of the bout, forcing Mesker to quit.
The referee knew too, and I said, I know
you know. Oh, don't speak English. I said, you speak English.
That's convenient.
Kerr and Coleman would make for a banger semifinal, and it really felt like that whole bracket was set up for it, with the hopes being the final would be Sokoudjou versus one of the two beefy American wrestling machines, with the undefeated Kerr a big favorite to win the entire tournament. Kerr and Coleman would earn their way into the quarters, but that is when things fell apart. Kerr's second opponent would be Fujita, a mid-card wrestling talent turned recent MMA fighter who only had 3 pro bouts at the time. Kerr was expected to smash, see what I did there, Fujita, and he would certainly try early, but gas himself out on Fujita's Homer Simpson-like skull.
There's a pattern emerging here.
The exhausted Kerr would get stomped for the whole second half of the fight, earning Kaz a massive upset win that would change his whole life, making old Ironhead an instant JMMA star, a status he would carry over into his pro wrestling career as well.
Wrestling's not fake!
Number 4, Pico Graham. Possibly the hottest prospect debut of all time was Aaron Pico in 2017. This dude was built to be a champion in mixed martial arts. By just 20 years old, Pico had been an alternate for the US Olympic freestyle wrestling team. He was a Junior Golden Gloves national champion and a Pancration national champion. When he turned 18, Bellator signed him to this big, long-term contract before he'd ever had an MMA bout. The hype for this kid was absolutely insane. One of the few gets that Bellator absolutely had over the UFC. After the 2016 Olympics, Pico would gear up for his Bellator debut, and he would be fighting Freeman, who has possibly the funniest nickname in all of MMA, the Altar Boy.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Freeman had competed exactly 3 times in the 4 years prior to his bout with Pico, and in that time had gone 1-2. So this was the perfect debut opponent for this up-and-coming superstar. A bout that would let him showcase his many talents on the road to actual contendership, and it would take place on the only ever Bellator pay-per-view main card, that huge NYC event. Bellator was not dumb. They knew this was an easy fight until it wasn't, of course.
He's hurt! Already won! Pico and Freeman looking for the choke! And Mamma Mia! Freeman has done it!
24 seconds. A disaster of proportions that are hard to even put into words. Freeman would only ever have one more pro bout, a knockout loss to Syed Awad. Pico would go 13-4 in Bellator before debuting in the UFC earlier this year by getting KO'd by Lerone Murphy, a much harder debut bout. Number 3, a prideful mistake. So what got Sokoudjou into Pride FC? Well, according to the Japanese language book Pride Secret Files and a few corroborating accounts, the promotion wanted a big black guy for their event in Vegas. I'm not kidding. I wish that was not true, but that is exactly what has been said. The rumor was that they wanted Kimbo Slice, but when word got around what they were searching for, Dan Henderson suggested his teammate, and apparently after one look at Sokoudjou, they signed him up. An insane story, but it illustrates that the promotion wasn't exactly interested in him performing particularly well, which is also evident when they paired him with the legendary Antonio Rogerio Nogueira. Lil Nog was one of the best in the world at the time to never hold a title, and Sokoudjou was just 3 fights into his professional career.
A bunch of butt-naked guys in a cage just doing some stupid things, you know. I never had any kind of experience with it.
You could hardly even call this an opportunity. This was expected to be a massacre. Nogueira was a minus 2,500 favorite. But of course, 23 seconds in...
Who would have believed it? Oh my God! Rogerio down and out!
One of the biggest upsets in the entire history of the sport. The first ever fighter to finish either Nogueira brother.
I've always been the underdog because most people don't know me. They didn't know until yesterday my skills and what I can do in the ring.
Sokoudjou would follow up with a second stunner of a victory, a KO over Ricardo Arona, which would prompt his move to the UFC after the merger, but he struggled greatly from there the rest of his career. He did beat Jan Blachowicz for the KSW light heavyweight title in 2011, but that was really the only other highlight outside of those 2 early Pride victories. But man, talk about a gimme fight going wrong for Nogueira. Number 2, reality TV star. The 4th season of Tough was a gimmick. A very cool gimmick, but a gimmick. You take fighters that weren't successful in the UFC and you give them the ultimate opportunity. Win the season, get a shot at UFC gold. Like something straight out of a movie. In reality though, the show would almost certainly produce 2 really terrible title fights with fighters who had no business competing with champions. Travis Lutter, one of the season's 2 winners, got his opportunity first and proved what a bad idea this was. Not only was his bout with Anderson Silva not even remotely close, but Lutter would miss weight, making it a non-title bout.
defeats the purpose.
The other tough winner, Serra, would get his opportunity a few months later against George St. Pierre. Serra, who had gone 4-4 in the UFC to get on the show, was a plus 850 underdog, and rightly so. This should have been a slam dunk for St. Pierre, who'd just overcome the greatest welterweight of all time, Matt Hughes. And instead, it was one of the biggest upsets and embarrassments this sport has ever had. The loss would change GSP's approach to fighting forever and immortalize Serra, who would eventually lose the title back to St. Pierre in their second encounter.
Well, that ruined everything.
Number 1, Maymac 1. Back in 2009, Tim Sylvia really needed a win. After dropping the UFC heavyweight title to Randy Couture, and then the next year losing an interim title fight to Minotauro Nogueira, the Maniac would exit the promotion and step into one of the biggest fights of his life. A showdown with Fedor Emelianenko that went horribly wrong, with a 36-second submission loss. Sylvia was technically still signed with Affliction MMA at that point, but was allowed to pursue fights elsewhere, and oh did he. That's right, Tim Sylvia was getting in on that boxing super fight action way before Conor and Nate and Jorge, all those guys, even before Couture versus Tony. Sylvia was meant to box Olympic gold medalist and WBO champion Ray Mercer at the Trump Taj in Atlantic City. But seeing as Mercer was 48 years old now, and Tim having never boxed in his life, the New Jersey State Athletic Control Board was like, we're not sanctioning this buffoonery because boxing had not yet spiraled into absolute madness. As a result, the fight would get moved to Deep South Birmingham, Alabama, the only place to go when you're running from a sanctioning body. At the last minute, Tim would get a huge victory, as the fight would now be fought under MMA rules.
We can get in there, he can kick and all that. I ain't gonna be kicking. I'm 15 years older than this guy, right? And I gotta do his thing, which is no problem. I'm willing to do it. I'm a man.
Not only was Mercer near 50, he'd never competed in an MMA bout in his life. This was a cakewalk for Big Tim. Let's see how it went. God damn it, Tim. Yep, 9 seconds in, Ray Mercer KO'd Sylvia. That is as bad as a gimme fight can go.
2 days ago, this was a boxing match. They changed it and made it MMA, and I whooped that ass, baby!
The editor of this video, Max Randall, would have beat Ray Mercer. Please show him some love on his socials and go check out his awesome YouTube channel. The guy is fantastic. A huge thank you to our channel members. We couldn't do it without you guys, and we would love to have more of you. Please hit the join button. There's exclusive content. I would highly recommend it. Like and subscribe so you don't gas out in your gimme fight. Leave a comment about which of these losses you reveled in the most, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.